Welcome to Utah Stories. So today on the program, we've got three excellent stories for you. If you haven't seen our new issue, it's out now all over Salt Lake City. And I'm going to tell you how you can order it, your own copy, and be a part of it in just a few minutes. So today on the program, we're delving into corruption in the mayor's office, alleged corruption, collusion, campaign finance problems. Is it legitimate? Did the mayor receive campaign financing that she should have disclosed from developers? Was she also involved in a land deal involving her husband that she should have disclosed? We're going to be getting into those stories regarding the mayor's office. We're heading into an election. The Mayor Mendenhall, currently the only opponent that I know of that's a viable candidate is former Mayor Rocky Anderson. We had him on this program a few weeks ago. We don't do ad hominem attacks on this program. We only look at the facts. We try to present both sides of arguments. That's kind of what you're going to get. That's going to be our first story. The second story is the big flood coming. We've been looking at the biggest rivers all along the Wasatch Front, and we're checking out what is the status of these rivers. We actually had 2 days ago the Immigration Creek River overflow its banks, and it started flooding into Imperial Park. We've got footage of that for you. We were there on the scene when hundreds of volunteers showed up. It was amazing. You kind of think that nobody wants to help anybody anymore these days, but I was actually really surprised to see this huge volunteer effort show up, sandbagging, shoveling sand into bags and diverting the whole river, which was traveling down 1700 south the day before, and making it really difficult for vehicular travel and taking out giant pieces of asphalt. They diverted the river across the road, and it's actually quite amazing to see that. We're going to share that story with you, and we're also going to talk about the likelihood of flooding of more rivers. You'll be surprised what I heard from Salt Lake City Corporation manager while I was on the scene there yesterday. And our third story is a talk and an interview with Hammer Springs Distillery, and he's coming on the program, and we're going to be talking all about the wacky liquor laws in Utah, how he navigates those laws, how he manages to run his business and create excellent liquor. And he does all sorts of products that we really enjoy, and happy to have him on the program coming up a little bit later. So, and then we got a homeless update for you. I've been still following the story, why they're not keeping tabs on the homeless death count, and trying to get to the bottom of that, how we can investigate homeless deaths. It, to me, is just appalling that we look at our Salt Lake City Police Department and even our Highway Patrol, which is also involved in the homeless problems, and they are essentially our most vulnerable population. They're the ones on the streets. They're the ones who are suffering the elements. They're sleeping outside, a lot of them. But we're not keeping track of who is dying where and when. And that just seems absolutely ridiculous to me, that we call on the police and the medics to protect and serve. To protect and serve who? Only the people who have homes? I mean, anybody could be out of a job. I think that if you talk to anybody from another country, or you even know people who started out with nothing, you begin to realize how many people live paycheck to paycheck, how many people end up on the streets sometimes for brief periods, and how those people don't need to be harassed and bothered by the cops all the time and have all their things raided and confiscated, and how that policy really needs to end. And concerning Mayor Mendenhall, I don't know much about her other dealings. We broke a story about a land deal that she did. But what I do know is she doesn't have the backbone and the courage to stand up against this totally inhumane homeless policy. And that is why I personally believe she needs to be voted out of office. I tell people, are you biased? Do you have biased coverage? And yes, if you're telling the homeless people, the homeless population, you cannot stay anywhere in downtown Salt Lake City without getting harassed, without having all your things confiscated, without having all your belongings with a sometimes just a 2-hour notice, uplifted in a front end loader and dumped into a garbage bin, then yes, I'm against that policy. I'm against that mayor who won't stop that policy from occurring. So we'll get into that story first, but before we do, I want to tell you about our brand new issue of Utah Stories magazine. It is now all over downtown Salt Lake City, Moab, and Ogden. If you live out of these areas, or even if you live in these areas, it is hard to get your hands on these, before they run out. That is because they move so quickly. But in this issue, we've got a lot of excellent stories. Our journalists, we're really asking them to step up and do more hard work. And we've got, if you like art and you like and appreciate the incredible talent that it requires to capture the likeness, especially of dogs in bronze, we've got a story by Nicole Anderson about immortalizing dogs in bronze. And it's about Lena Turich, who's a Russian immigrant who came to Utah, just an incredibly talented sculptor. And that's an awesome story about her. She's even sculpted dogs who have been part of the Navy SEALs. And she also does humans, and it's just an incredible story. Then we got a story that is showing the advantages of not having children. And then we got a story showing the advantages of having lots of children. We wanted to stay fair and balanced on that. So the story about not having children is by Francia Henriquez Benson. And then the story about having lots of children and even the things you can do after you have lots of kids, like most people think your life is over if you have kids. We've got a story called Mothers of Mayhem, which is about 4 Ogden moms who learn to rock. And they each have among them, I think it's 17 children. And they manage to get on stage and go rock, and they get gigs all the time. And they are really awesome at what they do, and they're out of Ogden. And that story, again, by Kathy McKendrick. And then we got Excellent Food Write-Up by Ted Scheffler. Another story about Rancho. If you know about Rancho Markets, which if you live in Utah, you'll know this incredible startup supermarket called Rancho Markets. They create all these amazing, fresh, delicious Mexican entrees. We talk about their formula of success and how Madrigal immigrated here from the U.S., and she got in the grocery business, and she started in Clearfield, and she just basically over the last 15 years has gone gangbusters and building this great, awesome empire of fresh, delicious, inexpensive grocery food. And she's competing right up against the likes of Harmon's and Whole Foods and doing an awesome job. So that is what you find in our print magazine, as well as an antelope herd, the last wild antelope herd out by the Great Salt Lake. I realized I was ready to ditch this print magazine because our printing costs doubled during COVID. We were about to give it up, but then we had a bunch of ladies who came forward and said, hey, don't give it up. What can we do to help? And so we said, I guess you could subscribe to the magazine and we'll send it out to you, and we'll see if we could get enough subscribers. And it was pretty awesome to see that you, our readers, stepped up and are willing to pay $3 a month to have this shipped to your home. And so if you want to do that too, you go out to utahstories.com, hit the subscribe button, and for $3 a month, we'll send it right to your home, and we'll send you the voice of local Utah. It turns out print is not dead. I keep discovering that over and over again. I was taught in journalism school 15 years ago, don't go into print. Print's dead. It's dying. Stay out of it. But you know what? I don't like reading the Salt Lake Tribune or the Deseret News in digital format. They only offer it 2 days a week now in print. I mean, there's just something about holding and feeling and touching paper and actually reading from paper. And it turns out there's studies that your brain retains far more of the information you read on a paper format than you do on an electronic computer screen. So it's really a reading experience that you get by subscribing to Utah Stories magazine, and I am so grateful to all of you who have decided to subscribe. If you don't want to pay, you can also get our free digital newsletter. That is absolutely free from utahstories.com. And subscribe this video, share this. I think I forget to say, if you appreciate independent local journalism that doesn't have an agenda, doesn't have an axe to grind, that's not biased, share this with a friend. That really makes a huge difference in more people discovering our podcast and what it is we're doing here. And so with that, let's dive into our first story. So I talked to a man today. I'm on this email thread, and this email thread's really interesting. It's basically people who are pro-homeless, and it's sent out by Robin Pendergrass. He's been on this program a couple of times. And it's just all about what's going on with the homeless community. He just kind of sends it out there to a bunch of people, and reporters and other people. And responding to this thread was a guy by the name of Michael Clara. And I wasn't too familiar with who he was. And he would be on the program today, but he lives in Glendale, and his sump pump is malfunctioning, and there's floods happening, so he absolutely can't leave his home right now. But I want to tell you what Michael said to me. So during the election campaign back in 2018 and 2019, he started to, he was living out in the west side in Glendale, and he started to notice that this property that was near his home was getting developed by a shell entity. It was a fake company. He looked into it. It was called Renee Properties, and it wasn't actually a licensed business. And so he did some digging, looked into it some more, and then filed a complaint that this developer was acquiring property and making petitions to the city to have part of the street actually given to him so he could develop on a multi-acre parcel. And there was still no entity for the business name. There was no licensed LLC. And so not long after Mayor Mendenhall was elected, it turned out that the property owner was Mayor Mendenhall's, at that time, new husband. And the new husband's name is Kyle Malafa, and he was acquiring these properties, and he was not... He wants to say he wasn't a developer, but I don't know what you call it when you're working actively to acquire city land as well as other properties to create a big enough parcel so you can develop on the land. But I call it development. So, but he wants to claim he wasn't developing the property because he later sold that land to a developer who is now producing, I believe it's called something New View, VIEW, and it's around 8th West and something like just north or south of North Temple. I don't know the exact address. But the point is that there were two votes on whether or not he should be allowed to obtain the city property. And during these votes, he just didn't attend the city council. She didn't attend the city council meeting. Mayor Mendenhall, she didn't recuse herself. She didn't file a formal notice that this was a conflict of interest. She just simply didn't attend, and she never gave any notice that this was a potential conflict of interest. And so that's a little bit fishy. I think that's a little bit problematic. And so Michael Clara filed a ethics complaint form, and that originally went to the state of Utah. The state of Utah sent it back because it was within 60 days of the election. Then she filed it to the Salt Lake City as an official ethics violation, and we don't think anything happened with it. We're going to do some more grandma requesting, and we're going to find out what's happened with that request, because it apparently has just gotten no investigation has happened into that. And we also broke the story on the mayor's office regarding the property, which was the former Pantages Theater, which absolutely historic, amazing property that the Salt Lake City RDA had in its possession before Mayor Mendenhall was elected. I think they acquired it for about $5 million. It was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million. And that property was then handed over to Joel LaSalle and the Heinz Corporation. And it's not the Heinz Corporation like the ketchup. It's Heinz Corporation is one of the biggest private land developers in the United States. They have billions of dollars in their portfolio. They wanted this property, and via Joe LaSalle, they got it for free. And the problem there is that this property was worth $10 to $15 million. It was really owned by Utah taxpayers, Salt Lake City taxpayers. Why should the mayor have the right to just give that land over for free? And so we had somebody doing an investigation for us into the campaign finances of the mayor, and it turns out that many small contributions by various developers throughout the state were the ones who were basically giving her all her money for her campaign. So about 70% of all of her campaign financing was given to her by developers. And when you find out who these people are, they're little shell entities or they're relatives of the actual developers. And so if you collect up the names of the relationships, you actually find that Joe LaSalle gave a bunch of money to the mayor, and in return, he got a free building worth $10 to $15 million, which he then handed over to the Heinz Corporation, which they then demolished, which is now an empty hole, which will not be developed anytime soon because Heinz lost their financing. And it just, if you are a downtown Salt Lake City person and who likes to walk around and you enjoy historic architecture, and now you see that big hole where one of the most architecturally significant buildings was located in downtown Salt Lake City, and now it's gone and it's not going to be developed, of course you have every right to be pissed off, as I am. Because first of all, why was this building given away for free? Second of all, why did Heinz go ahead and just tear it down when they didn't have financing in place? And third of all, why is nobody else looking at this? Like, why is it only us? Why is it only Utah Stories? I mean, this is the job of the media, the local media, and we are a very small outfit. We need to have a full-time investigative reporter. I think we need to have more going on. That's why I'm encouraging you to subscribe to the magazine, because nobody else is examining these things. And it's very sad. I've been talking to not only Michael Clara, who I mentioned earlier, but Rocky Anderson. Why isn't the Salt Lake Tribune reporting on these things? Why aren't they going into the campaign finances of the mayor? Why aren't they talking about what happened with this land deal with Kyle Malafa, her husband? It's just these issues need to be resolved, and it's sad to see that, you know, we are the only ones actually examining it. So I'm not going to say these are all allegations right now. I'm not going to say that absolutely the mayor is corrupt. This is collusion. This is awful, because I don't know all the details. We have to file a bunch of grandma requests, and grandma requests are the Freedom of Information Act requests you have to do to get the information, the data that can prove what's happened in these instances. And until we do, these are still allegations. And so, and these are not personal attacks against the mayor. Just from a factual point of view, how the mayor Mendenhall and Kyle Malafa became husband and wife, they were both serving in city council together, and they cheated on their spouses, and they became husband and wife. That's just facts. I'm not going to say whether or not that is absolutely awful, but I've had a lot of women say, you don't ever attack the mayor for her infidelity. That's not where you go. You can't talk about that. But I just don't understand, how come it's absolutely fine to attack Donald Trump all day long, who committed infidelity on his wife, but you can't talk about that regarding Mayor Mendenhall in Salt Lake City. I just think that if there's going to be a standard for men, the standard should also apply for women. So anyway, I think that we'll get more into this as the campaign approaches. As I told you, the reason why I don't believe Mayor Mendenhall should serve another term is because she does not have the backbone to stop committing these atrocities against homeless people who keep dying over and over again as a result of being harassed constantly. And so we also found out that more homeless people have died recently. There's been 2 more deaths just in the last month and a half. Again, it's not being reported on. There was a death at 9:40 p.m. just recently that the police are actually looking at this one because it was very suspicious. The man's body was found Tuesday. This was just this week, so this would have been April 12th, and at 900 South, 400 West, and they responded to the area. They found the body of a man. No information's been released. The police are doing an autopsy this time. They are actually doing a investigation. So way to go, Salt Lake City Police. I think this is a good step in the right direction, actually letting people know, and the Deseret News is actually covering it. So the same man who I mentioned, Michael Clara, is also tracking homeless deaths, and he's reporting on them on his own Facebook page. And he knew about a death on March 23rd that was verified as a unidentified body and an unidentified victim, and and both of them are right around where he's located. I mean, most of these people are camping around North Temple, west of the city, trying to find a place to camp. And when they don't have the proper sleeping equipment because it's been thrown away by the police, and then they freeze to death in the cold, of course the mayor is not going to ever say it's her fault. But if you're the one ordering the police to throw away their survival gear, who else should we blame? Obviously, that's where the blame should be placed. And so the other death that happened was near an abandoned building near Totems, which is on Redwood Road. And it's been very, very common this winter that more people than ever have been dying because they're freezing to death. So, that's, of course, very sad. The other story I wanted to share with you is the update on the flooding. And I want to show you this video now from Emigration Creek, which is right near 1700 South and 1600 East. I'm going to show you Imperial Park and around that neighborhood what was happening yesterday. Can we show that now? We're going to show that now. Okay, so this was the scene at Imperial Park. This is about 1600 south and about 1600 east. And this is what all these sandbags were the result of the neighborhood effort the night before. They bagged up thousands of sandbags along 1700 south. This is looking east on 1700 south. Just an amazing effort. This is where the river was running just 2 hours prior to me showing up yesterday at about noon. And these were the volunteers still on the scene. They estimated that 150 had showed up that day. As you can see, there was probably 50 or so at this site. And luckily, the weather has cooled down. And so today, I don't think it's gotten any worse. But this was the view of how they had channeled the water to go up and across the street. So you can't cross at about 1600 East because now there's a new river there. And I think that river will stay there for the next 3 weeks. I think you just won't be able to cross heading east on 1700 South for probably 2 or 3 weeks. So I talked to a guy in Salt Lake County, one of these county guys. He didn't want to go on record, so I won't say his name. But I said, what's the likelihood that other rivers are going to flood? And which rivers? And he just told me all of them. He said unequivocally, there is just so much snow in the mountains. There's 30 inches of water sequestered in the 14 feet of snow. And it's just more snow than we've ever recorded ever in the mountains above the Wasatch. And with temperatures now low, we just had another rainstorm yesterday, snow in the mountains, it's very likely that every single river, creek will flood. And so what we can expect is if you live by a creek, you better start getting ready. Unfortunately, it looks like they're already running out of sandbag equipment. They're running out of the bags. And so I would imagine that they can get their hands on them in the next few weeks and get more. But in Ogden, we found that they were running out of sandbags. In Salt Lake, I think they still have a lot. But if we're going to be talking about, today, obviously, Immigration Creek and potentially Mill Creek, Little Cottonwood Creek, Big Cottonwood Creek. We've got Dry Creek, Red Butte Creek, and City Creek. City Creek could be very problematic because it goes through right through the middle of downtown Salt Lake City. There's going to have to be a major effort by many thousands of people to make sure that we don't suffer from a lot of flood damage from the homes that are in the area. But as you can see, it's quite amazing. Like a lot of people probably just decided to get off work early or skip work and come out and help. And it's not actually what I expected. I thought people were more selfish than that today. I thought people were too egocentric. I was about to say that in the article, but it turns out, like, I remember in 1983, I was just a little kid. The Little Cottonwood Creek flooded over Memorial Day weekend, and my grandpa came and scooped up me and my brother, and there was 2 feet of water in his basement. And then that morning, about 2 or 3 hours later, we just watched, dozens and dozens of people show up and start sandbagging all around his house, all around up and down Little Cottonwood Creek. And it was just amazing to see. It was like these people, their homes weren't in jeopardy, but they wanted to go to the areas where volunteers were needed, and they actually stepped up in a major way to help mitigate the flood damage. And the effort was amazing to watch when I was a kid. And so I hope that can happen again. I think most people will be willing to step up, and I think we'll keep you posted on this show. And we've got an article coming out this weekend all about the likelihood of flooding and what to look at, and about the snowpack and how it's going to impact the different rivers at different times, because the watersheds of the different rivers are different elevation heights. And if you know the elevation of the main watershed, you'll kind of be able to predict when these specific rivers will flood. The Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood Creek, because the elevation area is so high up in the mountains, Snowbird and Alta, that's going to be hitting more like 3 weeks down the road. But then the lower elevation rivers, especially like Immigration Creek, Parley's Creek, those are lower elevation. Those are going to be the ones to look out for next week and the following week. All right, so with that, we are going to take a short break, and when we get back, we're going to be talking to Hammer Springs Distillery about the wacky liquor laws in Utah, and we'll be talking all about how he built his business despite those laws. So we'll be back with you in a few minutes.